It's my pleasure to call this working session of the HAC to order and would like to begin with item 2 on our agenda, a history of the rules development and a community response. A history, and Tom is going to give us some sense of the history.
Okay, so for those of you who haven't heard some of this stuff, I'm going to just give you a sense of the history of the Rules Committee part of this process. So sometime back, well over a year, 2 years ago, there were some issues at the swimming pool, and there was some quite a bit of discussion around those issues and the fact that the rules that existed on our ground sublease were different from the Kennedy Wilson apartments. So the HAC at the time authorized the establishment of a committee, which is something they're authorized to do in the ground sublease. And a rules committee was set up under a chairman different than I. And I can't speak much to that history, but
Well, their largest first accomplishment were dog park rules.
dog park rules, okay.
Dog park rules.
So they worked on dog park rules, and in October of last year, I took over as chair, and we began developing a more some formal documents that covered some of the other issues in terms of inconsistencies between our ground sublease and Kennedy Wilson. And so this committee moved forward. It consisted of 6 people, and we had one of the 6 was an inactive member, and the other 5 were very active. And we held a series of meetings. I will say that for those of you who've questioned some of the authorizations for this committee, the ground sublease, as I said, does allow the HAC to create a committee. The ground sublease also allows the HAC to provide recommendations for changes to our rules. So as I took over as chair, I confirmed with the chair of the HAC that this committee its purpose was to work through rules that will help resolve some of these issues and provide to the HAC a foundational draft of a rules document, at which point in time the HAC could decide what they wanted to do and how to proceed, including how to get community involvement. My agreement when I took over as chair was that the committee was not going to handle any communications with the community at large. We were there to create this draft, and then decisions about what, how, and when to bring the community into the process was up to the HAC, not the committee. So the committee proceeded to move through a series of changes, updates, additions, deletions to a draft of a rules document. There were probably 10 different iterations of this document created as it was changed, altered, and so forth. Trying to think of any other pertinent issues. Well, let me say that as chair, I took responsibility for control of the draft document. It was in Word form. So I was the gatekeeper and the sole holder of that document at all times during the committee's process. The document was not handed over to any other any other group. It wasn't handed over to Kennedy Wilson. It wasn't handed over to the site authority while it was in the hands of the Rules Committee. During our process, however, we did get input from Kennedy Wilson and from the police department and a few other sources to help us craft a better rules document, and also to clarify some rules that existed for example, for the community center. So we arranged a dialogue with Kennedy Wilson to clarify any rules or standards that exist for example, the community center. So at no time was this handed over and just said, here, do what you want and give it back to us. So all of that communication, all that feedback was, some of it was interpreted, some of it was translated, some of it was modified. But in the end, I did the initial filtering of all that and then presented it to the Rules Committee for their reaction and discussion. So I just want to clarify how that interaction between Kennedy Wilson and the site authority occurred. When the draft of the document reached a point where I thought we were kind of going a bit too far, and it was time to get the HAC involved and maybe community input, the draft was handed over to the chair of the HAC, and the Rules Committee was disbanded. And from that point forward, the document was in the control of the HAC under the management of the HAC chair at the time. And I guess because I worked with our chair, Chris Williams at the time, a decision was made when the draft was provided to the HAC was to forward that draft to the site authority, and that was done in an HAC meeting and then in a CAG meeting. And the document in this case was actually handed over to the site authority with the instruction they were to review it for significant legal or other issues that would conflict with the ground sublease. So that's what we asked them to do. And the main point was that before this would then be released to the community, we would have some comfort that the document didn't have some showstoppers that we would later have to retract. So the site authority met, several people met, I'm not sure exactly who, but they went through the document, they returned it to us. And in this case, they did turn the track feature on the Word document. So we saw all of their changes. They weren't significant in terms of volume, but maybe significant in terms of some of the reaction that we received from the community. So we received that, the HAC received that back from the site authority and made the decision to release the document to the public after that point. So that's kind of the history of how things happened. I'm trying to think if there's any other.
Thanks, Tom. I think that gives people a summary of the kind of what the timeline was and the fact that the committee, from your perspective, was operating. You have one more thing?
Let me share one other thing, because I was unable to attend the Saturday town hall, but I heard there were some comments about the secrecy of the Rules Committee. And I'll share with you a portion of an email I sent to one of the new members that I brought onto the committee. So just so you know, I brought in 2 new members as I took over as chair to increase the representation of family households in that committee. And this is an example of the text I provided to one of the new members. I had welcomed her to the committee, and the letter included the draft as we had it at that point. So there's some of that stuff, but the last two paragraphs read, as this document is a draft, please don't share outside your household. There are most certainly more changes to come. When this gets further down the line, it will be made available to the community for input. Also, keep in mind this committee is ad hoc, and while it is recognized by the site authority, has no formal standing. We are making recommendations only. If or when the site authority receives the proposed document, they may adopt none, some, or all of our changes. So I just want to make it clear, it's never been assumed that this committee would be making the rules, authorizing the rules, whatever. It was clear to everyone that we were creating this draft that would go to the HAC, and these are recommendations only. And to those who wanted to see the drafts, one or more of the drafts as they were created, as I pointed out in this commentary, I asked all the committee members not to disclose the drafts to the community because for a bunch of reasons. One was that our committee was commissioned by the HAC and we were to provide our draft to them, and we were not to get involved with community input or community disclosure. And if you disclose the document to one person, you need to disclose it to everyone. That's not fair and not appropriate. And I did have several people who requested to see the draft, and I'm sure I declined and did not provide that for this reason. So hopefully everyone understands it wasn't a secret. It's just, you can't tell one person. There are no favors. No one was to share this with their friend or anything like that. It would be disclosed when the draft was completed and handed to the HAC, and they were to decide when it would go to the community. It would go to everyone all at once. So that's the way we worked. So let me.
Thank you very much, Tom, for providing the context to the, I think, probably close to a dozen people who worked on this over the 2.5 year period that a rules committee was in operation at the HAC. Now, where I'd like us to move next is to begin looking at how we go forward from where we are. And where we are is this. We have that very same draft that was placed for public comment has been basically the base document for 3 activities: the public comment, a survey that was facilitated by Maisha Olson, and the community town hall that we did on October 2nd. That's been the base document. I see our objective now as to take the input that we've gotten from those sources and from the people who responded before this meeting to HAC input with additional comments, is to take those comments, integrate them into a new draft document, which is again merely recommendations, and at that point, engage in another round, another attempt to get broad-based community input. So one of the things I'd like to talk about at this point is clearly nothing we have done so far has gotten anything remotely resembling broad-based community input. So I'd like to open the floor for a conversation about what should we do or try to get broad-based community input. On the schedule, we had agreed to tentatively when we agreed to these special working sessions, that input would be happening hopefully during the first 2 weeks of December before everybody gets thoroughly into holiday mode. But during those first 2 weeks of December, what do you think we could try to get a broader number of people? Right now, we're sitting, depending on how you count, a disaggregated, taking out duplicate responses from people where I can identify it. And I can't identify it everywhere because I have no access to the actual names on the responses, except where we did something that was public, like the town hall. But other than that, I saw some names on the emails that came to HAC input, but I have not seen names associated with the original public comments, nor have I seen names associated with the survey. And nor do I necessarily want to see those things, but trying to get to a percentage of how many households have participated. We're something between 13%. We have 13% in one bucket, and we have 9% in the other bucket. If we assume they aren't duplicative of each other, that gives us a little more than 20%, 21, 22% response rate, which is pretty small. So let me just open the floor for your input for how we might do it.
Let me add a comment. I'm sure Carolyn will join in. So Carolyn has suggested a red line version of the document will help get a more robust response. And hopefully, Carolyn, you can speak in here in a minute, and she'll work on that, and we can add that to the next communication to the community.
Well, I'd like to get to that as kind of a next issue.
So there are other issues. There's been a concern raised that some of the residents want to remain anonymous. And I don't know how large that group is, but what that means is they would not be willing to participate in person. So we need to allow some type of, somewhere in all this, a way to respond anonymously. And we've tried doing it in the past in written response form. We've tried, well, I'll just back up. Aisha, for the social committee, if I understand the numbers, got an outstanding response in a very short period of time for an electronic communication. Now, it was different. It was a little bit simpler. It was just yes, no, pick the movie. I get all that, makes it easier for people to respond, but it was phenomenal. We've never had a response rate like that in the community. So if we can crack the nut on what part of what she did, why it worked so well, whether we could use that for this, that would be terrific. So, but I don't know.
It worked because it was simple. Yes, like as you stated, it was choose your movies and submit. It wasn't a long answer question or read a long document and provide feedback kind of situation. So people could submit the results or submit their choice within a few seconds.
But the point
I think that even the survey that she did regarding rules did have a pretty solid response rate.
Yeah.
Honestly, that was, I think, around a year ago, so I can't remember exactly how many people.
It's 22 people responded to that survey.
Yeah.
What I can't do is disaggregate them from other responses. So I don't know whether they're an independent group or whether they are people who responded in the public comments and
Sure.
responded in the survey.
So
But it's 9% in and of itself.
yeah,
If we assume that every person represents a household, which is also not necessarily true.
right.
So at the highest end, the number's 9%.
So if the goal is to get as many people to say something as possible, then you need a very simple, question, such as,
Yeah.
are you interested? Are you not interested?
Exactly.
And then that will give you a baseline of how many people you really need to be talking to. Because
Okay.
my guess is you might get a lot of people that'll just say, I'm not interested.
I don't care.
I don't care.
Right.
I'm not going to put in the time.
Right.
And so right there, you can shed whatever percentage of those people it might be. And then if you get enough people that say, I'm interested, now you can focus communication on those people who have said, I'm interested. And they give you an email address or something, right? And then you can say, from this point on, if you'd like to be anonymous, we'll continue to do surveys and you can answer these surveys anonymously or not. But we need a baseline, a base communication, an email or something to send out, to continue to send surveys. And then I would suggest that we continue to use a survey tool and continue to try to break it up into small manageable pieces and small manageable questions, such as, do you like this rule or not? You know, or would you prefer the rule read this way or that way? And then you might get more people to respond. I know breaking it up piece by piece and breaking it down kind of rule by rule, or sometimes even maybe small section by small section could end up being tedious and taking a long time, but
Well,
it does seem like we need to probably,
so it seems to me breaking it up by section
yeah,
and is certainly easy. And we have whole sections that got no response before.
right.
And I take that as an indication either the people are disinterested in that section, they don't think it applies to them, or that they're okay with what's there.
Right. And
Which
so
may or may
giving
not be.
somebody the opportunity to just quickly say, I'm okay with this section, let's move on, can
So-
help to get feedback. I'm okay with the section, and it
Okay.
moves us along. But I do still think, and I agree, I think a redlined version would help, that there's a lot of confusion over what the document already was before the rules committee even started this process.
Right.
You know, and many of the rules that have been brought up that people don't like, we're already in the document, right? And so because of that response, I do think we have to wind back a little bit this whole process and consider whether or not we want to redline rules that were already in the document. I mean, it shouldn't just be an additive process, right? So
I would suggest that what I have on the table tonight for us to look at really functions like a conceptual red line, not a detailed red line, but a conceptual red line, because I've divided all the responses into whether they're against an existing rule or against a new rule. So that distinction is clear in the material we're going to talk about tonight. But I think your suggestion that we break this up by section, for example, makes really good sense. And I do think once we've incorporated what I think are the very excellent comments we've gotten so far, I mean, I've read every comment multiple times, and I think we've gotten some really excellent feedback. And I'd like to honor that feedback by putting it in another draft that we then actually do at least a conceptual red line again on, or potentially, especially if Carolyn's willing to facilitate this, an actual red line that we make available to those people who want to see it. And that gives us
But then as we go through, as we have some working sessions, it could help if you want to garner more interest to find the 2 or 3, hottest items within that section, right? And then develop some very simple yes or no style questions to go out via, I think we use Google Forms to go out to the community. And if you can stick to, okay, now we're in section 1, article 5, and what we have one question: do you like the rule? Should kids be allowed to ride bicycles on the sidewalk? Yes, no. If the majority of people say no, then that gets redlined. If people say yes, then it stays.
It gets redlined, meaning
a rule that might say there's no riding bicycles on the sidewalks.
right. So, but by redline, what do you mean? Because I think there's confusion about what a redline document is.
Strike it.
Okay. So, what you're looking for in a redline document is
I guess that's more of a track changes kind of style.
Right.
Yes, it
but
is.
it's so
But-
similar.
Well, I think track changes is a substantive way of looking at it rather than the classic red line, which does every period and every comma and every other change that happens. I think track changes makes perfectly good sense.
Well, it'll catch every little space that you
Track
put on there.
changes will identify every period change, every.
Well,
Yeah, it does, and you have to go
Yeah,
in
I
and.
think Sandy has it backwards. It's the track changes that includes everything. A true red line
okay,
just shows the deletions and the additions.
Right.
Yeah. And so, if we identify those kind of couple of hot topics and we develop a very simple question around those to then go out to the broader community, you might find more input. At that point, maybe you'll get 50 or 100 people that can answer a quick 3-question, yes or no, each one kind of questions. And then at least you'll have that. At least you'll have 50 to 100 answers on some really simple questions.
So.
I agree with Kevin on that. I agree with Kevin because I don't think people understand that they're outlawing balls in the community, that kids cannot play with balls. And if they found that out, they might have a problem with it. If they found out the rule is that you cannot make a sound louder than a bird after 10 o'clock every night of the week, I think they might have a problem with that.
Okay, so I as well like the thought of using the survey concept to, we first should really find out how many people care.
right.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
because I kind of think a lot of people just don't care. It's like, whatever you want to do works for me. And I think it's probably the majority of the community, but we could find out.
I think asking is polite.
So that might be the first kind of
Sure.
survey we do, so we can quickly call that part of the community out and say, look, these folks have turned over the responsibility for the rules to the HAC. And that's,
So,
they're
so
gonna
to,
trust the
but,
HAC to do
but
the
to
right
me,
thing.
that just can't be a Google survey. That has to be something that we make sure is physically in every household's hands. Because not everybody's gonna go to a Google survey, even if we give them the link.
Whoa.
I don't know. Maisha's electronic approach reached a lot of people. Did it reach everyone? I don't know.
No.
But it certainly reached a lot.
It reached a lot more than we've reached with
Yeah.
anything we've tried,
Well,
and I think that's to be
It's
celebrated.
It's elicited responses from more people.
That,
Again, for-
right. So, I think that a high percentage of people are seeing electronic communications. I don't think that's the way we're missing them. I think that we're missing them because the communications are not clear enough
Yeah.
and not simple enough. And so if we do our best to put a big, header on it, and this is very important, and this is one quick yes or no.
Okay,
And if it's no, we're trying to gather a significant sample size of the community so that we can figure out yes or no. And we can say at least that this many people answered the question, this many people self-selected out of wanting to give us input, and now we have this group that has input.
Why-
Hey,
why
gentlemen
don't-
and ladies, am I allowed to do some input?
That's
Carolyn,
what
you
I
wanna go
was-
Sounds
first?
like it.
That's what I was asking for. We need to ask the community.
Okay, let's hear.
Okay, my input is this: after looking through all of this document, all the documentations, and looking at all of the emails, you're correct. This needs to be really simplified and broken down into chunks. However, we communicate to the rest of the community. The people that are on this call right now, we dig this stuff. We get all in. This is what we live for. This stuff. We understand it. This is what we do, or we're OCD or whatever the reason is. This is something this 11 or 12 or 13 people do. The rank and file want to go to a movie.
Right.
So as you've been, I think somebody has already said it. A, break it into chunks. B, make it extremely clear what this is about. I'm looking at all the emails now. I know what this is about, but talking about rules and regulations, come and vote, come and do this, rules and regulations. By the way, I'm not putting anyone down, by the way, okay? Like I said, there's some people love this. So this is me, my neighbors don't. So in the initial communication with the email, if we are breaking, for example, if we're going to talk about rules that won't let your kids throw balls down the street or whatever, if we're doing a section on, however you would name it, child rules in University Glen or whatever that label is, and it's very simple, you might get somebody to continue to read. If we also spend a whole lot of time on redlining and the technical component of how we track the changes, we all know that the only time we care to look at a lot of documentation is when we have to sign loan docs. If we spend a lot of time, and it sounds like we're spending a lot of time more on the revisions than talking about the issues, we're going to lose a lot of people. I'm rambling a little bit, but pretty much we need to make it a little more simple and clearer in chunks. So maybe we get a few more people to participate. The concept of a simple survey, you know, is a very good idea, and that's a great start. So does this sort of make sense? You look at this and people
Absolutely
just,
makes
you know,
sense.
yeah, so what do we start thinking about the people who don't attend and what they want to hear?
Right.
Like I said, if,
Right.
all right, if it's a
Right,
movie,
right.
yeah, they're gonna go to a movie.
So,
But if you,
so
but if you say, yeah, your kids can't throw a ball down the
Okay.
street, I don't know where that is in here. I bet you get somebody's attention.
can I do a quick poll? Is it a small enough chunk to take a topic area like pool or I think it's not small enough to take the common area because that's got such breadth in it. But there are topics inside the common area that I could see you'll see is if we get into the discussion of individual items tonight, when we actually get to the section on the common area, there are really like 3 topics in the common area that garnered a lot of interest in the feedback we've gotten so far. So that those we could pull out as chunks and treat them that way.
So,
Yeah.
So like everything I hear, let me step back though. So we've heard concerns, complaints about having in-person meetings or community discussions. So how does that fall in here? 'Cause this is
Not
talking
enough,
about
you mean?
Electronic, well, we're talking about electronic surveys. So this is all
Yeah.
remote, you know.
So if
stuff.
we paired meetings where we went through a section together openly with,
Uh-huh.
you know, whoever joined us each night,
Uh-huh.
with then a follow-up survey of the 3 main topics that through the open discussion, detailed discussion,
Okay.
you know,
Makes sense.
came
I like
through,
that.
then we would be pairing an opportunity to go through details for people that wanted to, and then opportunity for those key subjects that everybody kind of agreed on at the detail meeting to go out to a broader community. And if we go, I think that the smaller we break it down into groups, the more manageable it will be. I don't think we're in a hurry. We don't have a deadline. I mean, I know that there might be a sense of wanting to get something done, but you know, I think the smaller it is, the
So
better.
let me talk to timeline. I back up, this eventually, our recommendation goes to the site authority. They have to do whatever they're gonna do to it.
Or not.
Or not. They can choose to just put it in a box.
Mhm.
That will be their choice. Assuming they don't put it in a box and they actually want to go through the formal approval process necessary to make this change in this section of the ground sublease, which, by the way, they have the perfect right by the ground sublease to make these changes and to make them impactful against everybody's ground sublease, no
Mhm.
matter when you signed it and what's in it. I mean, that
Right.
the ground sublease allows these kinds of modifications to be made. And I think we do need to make that point really clear to people. But if you're backing that up and you're looking at what are your site authority meeting time opportunities?
Mhm.
So the next open meeting that anybody would have any hope of making, the next meeting is November 8th. We're not having anything done for November 8th.
No.
So the meeting after that is in early March. And that meeting is actually traditionally a more open meeting. There are fewer standard things on the agenda for that for the March meeting than there are for other meetings during the year.
Sure.
The next meeting is the May meeting, and that's the budget meeting. So it's kind of full. So if we don't make the March meeting, we are basically saying it's going to be the August meeting.
Okay.
Okay, and I think everybody has to be aware that we're then leaving this uncompleted until that point in time. The schedule I tried to put together backed up from what the lead time the site authority would need to have us transmit a document to them to make the March meeting.
Okay.
Now, we maybe cannot do that if we divide this into little pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But if little pieces would buy us real community involvement, then there's, to my mind, there's a purpose to the delay. I only object to delay that doesn't have a purpose. And if what we're doing is fostering broader communication in the community, that's a delay worth having.
Sure. Who knows? Maybe we'll even get momentum. So maybe, you know, as we go piece by piece and have a certain standing meetings, that more people will hear about it, and they might be upset that they missed a certain section, but at least there'll be momentum and more people will continue to hear about it. We have 29 chats on there. Should we go through those? Are there?
Yeah.
No, okay, so all I committed us to do with the chat at this meeting was to take it in writing at the end of the meeting and respond to every chat comment we get after the meeting as it's relevant.
So that'll just be saved and then
It'll all be
read through.
saved, and then we'll have a chance to, we'll respond to it thoughtfully. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation that we're having right now, which I think is awfully important.
So let me react to a couple things you said, Sandy. One is November 8th is what was on your calendar. Do we as a group think we could send out the first survey that parses the community into those that are interested?
So if we could at least do one or two of these sections tonight, we could send out a survey soon.
This has nothing to do with the detail. It's more
Oh,
so.
you want the, are you interested?
Are you
survey?
interested or not? Because then we can quickly figure out whether we're getting the. kind of
I would
participation we
think,
we should.
all right, I'm not a survey expert. I don't know how to use Google Docs to do a survey. But I would think we could figure that out or get some technical help from our knowledgeable community members to do it. But I think we could easily get a survey out by the beginning of next week that says, I'm interested, I'm not.
Yeah, so I think we should maybe try and resolve that today because it's fuse is short. And secondly, part of what has to happen in all of this, if it does come to a point where we provide recommended changes to the site authority, we have to engage Kennedy Wilson, because if they don't buy into some of this stuff, it's not going to work, because, you know, their residents use the same common area places that we do.
But I'm not sure it's our place to have to make that resolution, Tom.
Well, then someone has to, and if we just leave it to the site authority, then they're going to have to get with Kennedy Wilson and say, look, they're going to not let kids ride on the sidewalk.
We have a venue where we can take something that needs to be negotiated between the HAC, the site authority, and Kennedy Wilson. We could certainly,
okay,
as we complete a section and we're trying to gather input from the community, once we have input from the community on a section, it could go to the CAG and be discussed at the CAG at that point. I mean, that would be logistically the way I would say.
okay, but it's almost more of a negotiation process, because I've had some of those discussions, and like a lot of the discussions were clarifying things, like the community center rule was unclear, the way it broke things down. So some of it's just kind of working through clarification, making sure we got it right, and they understand it. But some of it is truly, we disagree. I mean, several of us are very unhappy about the alcohol rule for this community center. And there's gonna have to be a negotiation type effort underway to find a
Common ground.
common ground.
Sure.
So that
Okay.
needs to come in, as your point.
But
All
if-
right,
But if
okay.
we as the community come in and say, we want to take that out, and Kennedy Wilson says, well, for liability reasons, they want to leave it in, then you're right, negotiation starts, but we don't need to bring them into our side of
No, but I'm
figuring
just
out
saying at
how
some
we would
point
like
in
the
time,
rules.
Right.
we need to go through
But,
the next iteration of this, or some iteration of it near the
But
end.
Yeah, it ends up
To
going
see-
to Kennedy
well,
Wilson.
or think
Otherwise,
about
it
it
dead ends.
on a section, but if we're creating chunks, every time we have a chunk that the community has decided they're okay with,
Yeah,
then take that chunk to the CAG
right.
and use that
Okay.
venue to have the conversation.
That's all we can do. We can
Okay.
recommend the community is, would like the rule to be this. This is what the community, the homeowners would like it to be. If Kennedy Wilson wants to change it at that point or do other things, then that's what ends up happening. Do you know what I mean? But it's not our job to represent Kennedy
No,
Wilson.
no,
So,
but it's our, at some point in this process, we want to make.
they're gonna get a say.
Yeah, we want to do our best to
So,
ensure we
so,
found something that's agreeable to everyone, as best we can do that.
so I was on the CAG and we did the dog park rules. Those rules, once the HAC was comfortable with them, I took them to the CAG and had exactly this kind of a conversation with Kennedy Wilson. And we made some modifications
Yeah.
based on
But-
the advice of their legal counsel and came to a compromise agreement on what those rules looked like. And everybody seems quite happy. So I think that process is possible.
Okay, we're overplaying that discussion. I just wanted to remind everyone, in the end, we need to reconcile their perspective with ours, or someone needs to. And I
Yes.
think we should be involved with that and not leave it up to the site authority to do that on their own. And a final point is, I am concerned there is some urgency to not let this go on too long, because I have an impression, I won't say why, that especially with the 32-acre project coming on board, that the site authority will be working on rules fairly soon. And I'd rather we have our say, at least in terms of phase one, before they start doing their thing. 'Cause
Oh,
they-
okay,
they
so-
will develop rules without us.
So
for
we're,
phase two.
so we're already late. The master ground sublease is done. The individual ground subleases, so for single-family homes and for townhomes and for the age 55 and up apartment complexes, because they have special rules that govern who can live there. Those three things are being negotiated as we speak.
So, and there is a need for phase two rules to blend with ours if they're going to be separate. I don't know if they are or not, but because those residents will share our streets and a lot of our common facilities, but they may have different rules as well from ours. I don't really know, but the point is, we want to try and stay ahead of that game before they just slap down rules and say, here you go.
Well, that, you're now describing why I felt an urgency to get this done on a timeline. What we're balancing is the ability to have impact, Tom, that you're describing, and Kevin, the potential to get a higher level of involvement. Those are both valuable things to do. And as we work through this, I think we have to try to figure out how to create an opportunity to have a balance between both. They are both goods that we want. We want to achieve both goals. And
So I just bring it up as
I mean,
I don't know.
the first thing, they would have to actually listen to us on any of our comments regarding the 32 acres. So I don't know how we have their ear regarding the 32 acres. Whether we finish rules or not, they haven't asked us about anything
And they
over
may
there.
not.
And as much as we might try to insert ourselves, they might not
They may not.
care at all.
They may not.
So yes, I get that that could be, it might be a point, but I don't see that as the driving factor. And we should be inserting ourselves whether or not we've finished our own rules, right? We should be saying, hey, you guys need to share your thoughts about the 32 acres. Can you share, they should be sharing their draft rules with us at this point for comment. You know, I mean, there's a lot of other financial points regarding that 32 acres that I'd rather be working on instead of the rules. But
the point is, they could in the end say, here they are. And it's surprise, and they
Well,
don't involve us, so we don't.
Well.
so we
okay.
should make a claim. I think Carolyn wants to say anything.
Yeah.
She's muted.
Yeah, Carolyn, can you hear
Carolyn,
me?
you're muted. We can't hear you.
What's happening is it seems like we're having a conversation between Miriam and Tom about process. I thought we were going to go over the other comments that we had from the people, which
And you call us to account. I think we brought that
and the
to-
truth is, and
to
the
proceed.
truth is, no matter how many rules we make or how quickly we do it, if the site authority says we're going to change all the rules, the site authority can do that. So I don't understand the urgency. And another thing that we haven't done is we know that some of the old rules are wrong. They don't make sense. Like, you know, whatever, you can't have window coverings. It just doesn't make any sense, but we haven't corrected those. So I think we need to address the other comments. And the main comment I made at the last meeting was, we don't enforce the rules we have, but we want to put all this energy into making new rules, but we don't even enforce what we have. So what is the point and the purpose if we can't even enforce what we have?
Right.
Okay, I have a question where I'd like to dovetail on what Carolyn says after kind of, for the first time, looking at my ground sublease agreement. From what I can see, the only enforcement policy, the only enforcement power that an HAC has to do with the grounds, architectural, fines, and whatnot. And to her point, which is really important, these rules and regulations or these standards of living are extremely important. So what can we do when we talk to the site authority about finding more ways of enforcement? From the conversations we've been having over the past few months with the police coming to all of our meetings and actually being at the town hall meetings, for a lot of the things we're talking about, they have no jurisdiction over that. However, if you make a rule, we do have to think about that, and that's what's lacking here. That's not anyone's fault that's in the community room there. So I'm being very clear to say I'm not blaming anyone for it, but that's the big elephant in the room. How are these enforced? And are there ways we can figure out? The site authority is the only one that can tell us how to enforce it, but what recommendations can we make to the site authority, not only in terms of the rules, but also how the enforcement is to take place? I went through all of that to get to this, so.
Well,
Thanks. No.
Well, in terms of enforcement, I think in any community association, a lot of rules are very difficult to enforce. I lived in communities that had private security patrols, and they did a lot of the enforcement. But in the end, you still have rules that require self-enforcement. You're not going to, even things like dog poop. I mean, enforcing dog poop is extremely difficult. And we rely upon residents to honor rules that are in existence. So that's got to be part of this as well. But I mean, some rules just are difficult to enforce.
That's true. You're absolutely correct, but there could be one or two that we can we can put some teeth into. You're correct. Most of this is self-enforcement, but you know, if you got a rule and there's no way to back it up, why are we wasting this time in the first place?
Well,
I think this time should be wasted. So I think it should be, but
It's a good question. I mean, if a rule's unenforceable, then why are we writing
But
it?
that's my point. I think a good part of the community, they obey the rule because it's self-enforcement and they respect the rule. If we said that there's no dog poop rule, we don't care, we're going to have more dog poop.
If there's no rule that says you must pick up dog poop, you think everybody's just gonna leave the dog poop?
I think we'll have more people who won't care.
I don't think so. I think the people that pick it up already pick it up, and the people that don't care already don't care.
All right,
I don't think that any of them even know if there's a rule in the rule book that says that they're supposed to pick it up or not.
okay,
I think society says you're supposed to pick up your dog poop,
okay.
and the people that care, and the people that don't already
Okay, so
don't.
you're arguing no dog poop rule.
Sure, no
Okay,
dog poop rule.
okay.
The point is, what I think is there's no way to enforce the rules that cause people to take an action, but some of these rules don't require enforcement. Some of these rules are like, oh, I want to put my pots in the community area. I want to expand my area, my personal items into the community. So people want those rules so they can build out. And that's not an enforcement process, but I do think that it's a problem with putting personal items in the community area.
But Carolyn,
I
that
brought
is-
all these things up.
That is enforcement.
But that is a time, so the only enforcement that we have for any of these rules is Kennedy Wilson, Jake, writing people citations. That's the enforcement. So
Right.
you have the police and you have the law, and then you have these rules and you have citations from Jake. And if Jake's not going to write a citation for if Jake's not going to write a citation for a rule that's on the books, then that rule should be taken off the books. And the pots in the common area, that can be, you can get a letter. Jake gives people letters that say, you've left this in the common area and we would like you to take it out. You know, I know a couple of years ago, we asked Jake, it was actually, I think, the direction of the site authority or the HAC, and the site authority agreed that Jake could ease the letters on people having pots and plants in certain areas. And I think that also the HAC agreed that due to the poor landscaping, that we were going to allow people to kind of fill in where there were dead spots. So that was a kind of a separate exception, I think, as far as the pots go. But overall, it's a completely enforceable rule, unlike dog poop.
Well, except that what is exactly out there is in one place in the ground sublease, it says no pots. In another place in the ground sublease, it says folks can have plants wherever they want. So we have a contradiction in the ground sublease that we really do need to resolve.
It says they can put plants up in the park. It says wherever they want. I've never
No,
read
basically,
that.
no, it's talking about in around their own townhomes and homes, but it does, plants are allowed in one place and not in the other, and that's a conflict.
So let me pause all this. So Carolyn's raised the issue about enforcement, and Wendell has as well. It's been raised before, and the HAC, I think, should take a stand. We can do it without changing the rules or not about enforcement. Do we want enforcement of our rules to give them credibility?
Well,
I think that if our rules are good, I'll let Carolyn talk for a second.
the truth is almost every rule that we have in the world and the state of California are not specifically enforced. Most of the people follow the rules because it's the right thing to do. So when I got my sub-ground lease, I read the rules and then it's like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's the way we're supposed to do it. That's the way most people in a society live. So most people follow the rules. The enforcement is for the people that, you know, don't follow the rules. So I disagree that we delete the ones that we can't enforce, because they do have a purpose, because people that follow the rules do follow the rules.
And Carolyn, I agree with you, and I think in general we would all fundamentally agree that self-enforcement is our first line of defense. What I'd like to do, if we could at this point, I think Kevin's given us some good suggestions on how to go forward. I'd like to do at least one or two of these sections to see if we can get to a point where we've worked our way through one and see how it
And
functions.
I guess a point of order in terms of the discussion we just had, kind of action items coming out of this. Do we want to, as an HAC, provide some kind of communication about enforcement to Jake? To help with our rules process?
I think we should ask Jake how much he's gonna enforce.
But do we want to give him any guidance?
Well,
Or,
We have, I mean, we've given guidance as issues have popped up, such as the pots and the landscaping.
okay, but we're all saying it's not being enforced. So do we want to take a stance and communicate something on that issue or not?
I'd like to have a clean set of rules before we tell him to go out willy-nilly enforcing.
Okay,
I think to tell him to enforce a document that's contradicts itself in places, is unclear in other places,
Yeah,
is not a purposeful thing to do. But
So-
I do think that is our goal. And one of the reasons to engage in this exercise is to get to the point where we can say, here is a relatively clean document that has some level of community support and therefore some willingness for self-enforcement. Jake, please now administratively do what what you would normally do in a community that's,
that's
Okay.
only after they're approved, because they're not approved.
I get it, but
Okay, so you're saying wait. And for those who complain about enforcement, we say, we get it. It's down the line here. Once we get through all this, we're going to expect better enforcement.
So we've done, I think, budget-wise at least, we've done probably the thing that gives us a way to resolve things that become intractable. And that is that we put a mediation process in place by funding mediation in this year's budget.
Well, that-
Now, we haven't required anybody to do it. It's not in a rule yet, but we've at least made it financially possible for that to be suggested and to get people to voluntarily participate.
do we want to venture into that?
You know, I don't even want to go there because most people that have to mediate pay for their own. I do not appreciate anybody putting mediation in a budget where I have to pay for someone else having a problem with their neighbor. When you have a problem with your neighbor, you go down and you mediate. We have low cost mediation here. I don't even want to go there. We're supposed to be talking about the rules.
All right, so can we turn to, can we put up the double screen we talked about? And put up the agenda, which has, and I'm going to leave, let's interweave the less is more conversation into this as we get to items where it maybe is an appropriate part of the conversation. So let's start with the common area on the agenda. And in the common area, there are 4 items where we have some consensus of people objecting to what's there or making suggestions about it. The first is that wonderful paragraph that says no blackout curtains, along with a few other things. Now that
I have a question. What is a blackout curtain? I don't even understand the concept.
it is a curtain that keeps the light from coming into a room. Frequently used so that children can take naps in the afternoon, or people who work second or third shift can sleep during the day. I have no idea why this ended up in the ground sublease, but this is an existing ground sublease rule. It's actually in 2 places. It's in ground sublease exhibit E 3.13, and it's in the addendum 3.d. So this is an existing rule that we had a group of people say, we think this makes no sense.
No, thank you, Sandy. That's what I thought it was, and it doesn't make any sense. Thank you. I thought it was something.
Right, so it doesn't make any sense. So I would propose that we delete all references to this in our recommended rule draft.
But listen. This rule is for the common area. Our curtains, our windows are not in the common area. So that's
Right.
number one. So it doesn't
No,
fit there.
I'm sorry, it's not written that way. It's written that it's in a common area distinction, but the way the rule is actually written, it is written saying thou shalt not.
I know, but it
Should-
says in the common areas. So I agree that it should be deleted, but this whole this says this section is common areas, not our personal windows. So I think
So,
it doesn't apply to me, and I have blackout windows. I can show you, Wendell.
Yeah, but
I have blackout shades. I'll show you.
Well, that's the whole point. I think I have them too, and I've had them at other houses. So that's what I said. That's going to be a problem. So
And you have to have them here because of the bright lights that shine in your windows.
Yeah,
Right.
let me put his perspective on it. I have a neighbor that uses cardboard. And they do it not for children. And I don't want to say a whole lot without kind of getting into personal issues, but they have, there's someone in their household that has a medical need to avoid light. That's all I'll say. So they use cardboard, okay? I think, I hear the common area issue, but we also, maybe this is an architectural issue, but it seems like we should put some type of rule somewhere that says you need appropriate window treatment.
You know, no.
Okay, so are you willing to have
So,
cardboard in
so,
your
so
people's
can,
windows?
can we do my less is more approach to this? If what someone uses to cover their window doesn't meet our aesthetic guidelines for the community, why don't we just ask them to change it out on that basis rather than by specifically saying thou shalt not have cardboard?
Well, but I think Carolyn's arguing that's not our role to have a rule like that. Is that what you're saying, Carolyn?
I didn't hear her say that.
I think what's happened here is the rules have, am I muted? The rules
Oh, we
have
can hear you.
they've gotten so detailed that they're not appropriate, and that's why we don't get any changes or any response. I don't think we say no cardboard, and I would hope that there are other, I mean, I've got rules from other HOAs galore, you know. Has anybody looked at anyone else's? But honestly, there are rules in other communities that talk about no sheets or blankets over your windows. They do that.
So what do we do?
Well, I would like to just delete this entire paragraph because it makes little or no sense as a whole. And then
Yeah, well, it
if
does.
we have a problem down the line, we'll add something back in. But I would like to just say this one, it's badly written. It doesn't do a good job of communicating. It's out there in multiple places. We just need to recommend that it be taken out of those multiple places. And if we have a problem going forward, let's grapple with it. But right now, let's use a less is more approach and say, we don't really need to regulate this.
So go ahead, Kevin.
You're saying take out the whole paragraph, like do not hang clothes, brooms, mops, or rugs on the balconies. I have the
Yeah.
apartments across from
Most,
me.
who has a balcony?
The apartment people. This is
But
applies
these
to everyone.
are not apartment rules. These are for townhomes and single families.
It says common areas.
Oh yeah,
Nick.
single families have balconies.
It says
Um,
common areas.
This section, so wait, I'm just a little confused still about our process here a little bit. So if I was somebody new coming to a meeting, because I thought we were going to talk about, you know, section 5, where was the
So.
title sheet of the rules we were on?
What we don't
earlier,
have up
community
is
rules.
the.
So if I
no.
thought we were going to be talking about the tot lot tonight, or let's just, one of these sections, then really what we're going to, the process would be that I would show up not having seen any of the other detailed conversations, and that we would already have this kind of sheet of here's what's in the section, kind of broken down like what we were just looking at. And some of our comments, our input already aggregated into that in the form of just kind of a quick count of who's made a comment on that.
So what?
I mean, that's what we were just looking at.
So what I built is,
Right.
this is a summary of all of the comments we received through noon today.
Right.
So anything that happened after noon today, I didn't capture. But this is every comment that we've received categorized by the area and the comment subject. And then I counted how many people basically agreed with that comment. So that this gives us and then I tell you where.
Right, where it is. I get that.
If it's in the ground sublease, it's here. If it's a new rule, it's noted as a new rule.
I get that, but so this isn't in order of the actual rules, and it's not in order of the actual ground sublease.
It's in order of the sections as they were presented in the draft document that was put out for comment.
But Sandy's intent was to go through only those rules where we received the most number of comments to this point.
To this point.
Right.
And this
Tonight.
apparently is one of them. Is that right?
All right, this is one
So this
where,
received a
this
lot of
is
comments.
one where we have 8 comments on the basic rule.
Sure, I get
And
the
then
blackout.
and
I
then
get
we-
that.
so-
I get that. I'm just,
So what I'm looking at is us looking at the things where we have some level, given our small response, some level of consensus about a change that people would like to see.
so we can have this conversation here tonight, but then we started this whole meeting with a conversation of kind of, hey, square one, we need to figure out who's interested. And then from that point on, we should
Right.
start going step by step, section by section,
But I think.
and then,
but-
and have kind of that 3-step process. So now, so we're not gonna do that. We're gonna move
No,
to this.
I think we will do that, but I'd like to get us to a level playing field to implement what you're suggesting. And that level playing field is, we've got a draft document. We have a pile of comments.
Okay,
I would like to acknowledge those comments.
okay, and get those into the
and
document.
get those
Okay.
into the document and then proceed with your process.
And then go through a step by step with kind of a new, hopefully getting more input.
But I like your idea of sooner rather than later, just, are you interested or are you not interested, doing that soon?
Right.
So are we tonight going to, we've got a quorum,
Well-
are we going to vote on some of these as we discussed them on what to do?
I think that's reasonable.
Okay, so.
Maisha was joining us. but I don't see her.
Well,
out
No,
there.
Malia.
Malia, I'm sorry, Malia was joining us. I'm sorry.
Okay, so,
I apologize to both of my M friends.
okay, so procedurally, if that's what we're doing tonight, just.
We are not going to get very far.
Okay, Sandy, but if we're gonna make changes, someone now has to control the draft and do red lines. Okay? Because
Okay,
otherwise,
so I'm not volunteering to do red lines. I am volunteering to know every change that I make in the document, but not as a red line.
I just want to make
But
sure
it
we figure
comes
out what to
from-
do with this.
It comes from the minutes to this meeting, our decisions item by item, and it's basically, this is what we decided to do
Okay,
with objections to existing rules on window
okay,
coverings.
it's fine, just so long as we understand, we've got to track all this in some form or fashion, because when people see the next version, they need to know we changed this part.
Right.
Right,
That's-
so
Somebody can figure that out. I just
So
wanna make that
I'm not volunteering to do the red line, but I am volunteering to understand by the history of this, where we made changes.
And we're recording the meeting, so I know that you can always go
Okay.
back and listen to
clear.
it.
Yeah, it's just we have to communicate it to the residents. Right? Okay.
Mhm.
That's my only point. So we've got one point in front of us, what to do with this tinfoil blackout. And so we're now making decisions about how to change the draft going forward.
Okay, and so I think to Carolyn's point, there's two issues with this. One is that it's in common area, so it which should probably be completely struck because our curtains, rules around our curtains is not a common area situation, right? It's more of a individual
it is-
houses
yeah,
situation.
It has been the interpretation of the site authority that if it is visible from the common area, even if it is on your property, it can be governed by common area rules. We could disagree with that, but that has been their interpretation to date.
There is another rule pertaining to signs in your window, as I recall. There's some.
Yeah,
So-
is that common area as well?
I don't-
Yes.
No, is,
Yes.
yeah, okay, yes. So.
What would be standard HOA, sections? Would that be common area or would that not be common area?
Like Carolyn, I've seen things all over the map. If you go to Spanish Hills, they're they're very particular high-end community.
Sure.
They're going to regulate the crap out of everything, including how you mow your lawn.
I'm fine with something that says, you should have proper window treatments, basically just saying you shouldn't use cardboard or tinfoil in your windows. But where does that belong?
I think it belongs in the way this is handled currently, it belongs in the common area because it's visible from the common area.
Okay.
At this point, I'm not sure I care.
Okay.
I think it should be somewhere.
Okay.
It's some kind of
So-
architectural guideline. Or
I'm
here.
sorry, I need a basic definition of what common area means. For example, is a sidewalk a common area, or is the common area like the grounds that are around the townhomes? Is a sidewalk a common area?
Those are normally both the common areas,
Yes,
Okay, so-
sidewalk,
but and that's why I'm saying that a window treatment inside your house, I have trouble seeing why it would be a common area.
Does anyone have a copy of the ground sublease? It has a lot of
I certainly
definitions.
do.
Let's see if there's a definition on common area.
There is a definition of common
And
area.
maybe there's not.
No, there is. There are actually there is more than
I
one.
think
As
Ivy
a
might
matter
have
of fact.
maybe she'll have a searchable.
Does somebody sitting next to a searchable?
Can you find it and point her the way?
It's,
Unless you have searchable.
there is one definition in Exhibit E, as I recall, and one definition in the body of the ground sublease.
Yeah.
Okay, Article 1, definitions. This is in Exhibit, it's,
No? Yeah, okay, you can search there too.
okay, so
Why don't we
this
go
is
to the
definitions, the common areas mean all lands in the University Glen located outside exterior walls of the buildings constructed on the lots, whether improved with homes or apartments, including all streets, street meetings, sidewalks, recreational amenities, open space areas, playing fields, or other landscaped areas.
Okay,
Sounds like the inside of your house is not a common area.
so it sounds like. So,
I'd like to keep it that way, probably.
but on the other hand, I'm not comfortable we allow residents to do things which aesthetically affect the neighborhood.
Doesn't just need to go into the household rules, just not the common area. What's the other rules?
Well,
Where are
we
the
have
other
architectural
sections?
Guidelines, I think.
Okay, yeah, put it in the architectural guidelines for your house.
I don't even know if I haven't read those guidelines, and so I'm not sure what they are. So,
They're in like Exhibit C
Okay.
or something like that.
how,
So then when we hit these kind of points, perhaps we put a pin in where it goes,
Okay.
but we figure out if we agree on the basics of what the rule should be.
Good suggestion.
So,
like that. So I think I agree with Kevin. I think we should have something that pertains to acceptable window treatment.
I'm fine with just saying no cardboard and tinfoil.
That leaves it open for blankets and
From the outside, it's hard to tell a blanket from a curtain.
Well, untrue.
Okay,
Okay.
so I heard,
If I put blankets in my window, she'd know right away, because I'm right at ground level, right where people walk. So, but again, if we don't care,
Well, if you just use the word proper window treatment, then that's very
as many things are subjective.
subjective, yes.
ultimately, everything is subjective, so,
You know
So
what?
it's just
I
a-
just
just at
Googled,
what
I
level?
just Googled something
uh-huh,
and they have this, all windows and or glass doors shall be covered with blind drapes and verticals and must have a white or neutral black color. That is one HOA
I'm-
rules.
Okay.
Carolyn, could you email that to me? Because I
But
can't write that fast.
I know, but I just Googled it, and what I think has happened is, there's a lot of different rules that we could just look at other rules, steal them, right? We don't have to
Sure.
rewrite them.
Yep.
Yes,
That's called, what do they call that? You're not supposed to do it in undergrad. What's it called? When you steal?
plagiarism.
Plagiarism. I was taught it undergrad, no plagiarism. But then when I got to law school, it's like plagiarize, because
Sure.
that's how the law works.
No, the new term is called repurposing.
Repurpose, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you just
repurpose.
repurpose and change 2 words of it, so you're not
Oh.
plagiarizing. But that's
I got
that
it.
was a good find.
So in the name of time, I think are we all in agreement that we should have a basic window treatments rule
Okay,
Somewhat.
in the proper place?
proper window treatment rule in the proper place.
Any other comments on that one?
Okay,
All right, we lost Ivy because I think she had to go get power cord.
We may lose you in a minute. Her one laptop is
Yeah.
running out of battery power, so.
So
Right.
what's our next
so
major item?
the next item on the agenda is loitering, which in our conversation at the community town hall, Officer DeBoni reminded us is not a legal term and not a legally enforceable thing.
Yeah.
And I would again suggest when we get to loitering, that we simply strike all the loitering references out of the document because it's it's a term of art in policing that's been historically used to discriminate.
Sure.
Well, that's not true. There is a penal code against loitering, and it means to stand around waiting to with the purpose of doing something illegal and with the intent to create a crime. So it is a rule. It is a law, Sandy. That's wrong. You're wrong.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm just quoting Curtis from a week ago.
So
Well, I checked it in reference to these rules,
Yeah.
but the rule that's in here is ridiculous because loitering is by definition unnecessary.
But so let me give you a real life example where we need something. And this is in a lot of interesting things happen in my end of the neighborhood. And so, and I want to not describe too much for certain reasons, but we had a situation where a resident was peering into the window, standing and looking into windows, and they'd walk through the flower bed up to the window, not touch the window, but stand there and look inside someone's home. I found out later a second neighbor had the same issue. So so this neighbor called me and said, "What can we do?" And I said, "Well, loitering, I don't know. I don't know how we stop someone from doing that."
Okay,
So
that's not loitering.
That's peeping Tom.
well, it's not quite by definition. So I'm arguing we need something, and I'll give you another example. So I personally did have a situation where not too long ago, there were 3 guys about 18 hanging around the gate of my patio, and they were vaping, just kind of standing around. It's very unusual, didn't know who they were. They stayed there for 10 minutes, maybe, And then a car pulled up and I'm at a dead end alley.
Sure.
And then they went over and there were other people in the car and they got real close and I don't know what took place. So I ended up going outside just to say, hey, what's going on? And I scared them off and they left. However, had they not, or if they had kept coming back, what can I do? And what can my neighbor do when someone's peering in the window continually, like daily, and it's actually right at night, to stop that? Now, Jake took care of it. And in the case of looking through the window, we knew who it was. Jake took care of it and it has stopped. But the party did argue they had the right to stand in front of a window because the flower bed was common area and they could stand there.
Well, of course they can. Why not? I mean, if you think they're looking in your window, put some tin foil up. No, I'm kidding. Or close your drapes. Close your drapes.
Carolyn, if that happened at your home, don't you think you want some kind of action?
I wouldn't know because I close my drapes at night so people won't look in, because you know what, when you walk up and down Anacapa and there's the windows are open and there's no drapes, it's just human nature to look inside the house. So if you don't want people looking in, close your drapes, close your blinds.
That's I'm not talking about someone walking down the sidewalk. This is someone who left the sidewalk, walked into the flower bed, like the flower bed's near your window, and they stood there and stayed there.
And how do you know they did that?
What's that?
How do you know they did that?
Because we found out who it was and they essentially acknowledged it was them and said they had the right to do that.
No, but how do you know that they were standing in your flower bed looking in your window?
Because the people my neighbors were sitting there on the couch watching TV and were freaked out with a face 3 inches from their window looking in at them watching television. So
close the shades, problem solved. It's if somebody is window peeping like that, that's a criminal, that's a nuisance, that's the police. But close those shades.
I do think you can call the police on that and and file a complaint.
But it's not illegal.
No.
Because it's common area.
Close the
You can make crimes in the common area.
Yeah, but
It's a nuisance.
Just because it's not a rule doesn't mean it's not illegal.
No, but
These are the differences.
Looking through a window from 4 inches, it's not illegal.
Standing right inside, up against somebody's house and looking in their house, you could.
What law is there against that?
You're being a public nuisance.
Well, they're trespassing in your private area, number one, but why not close the blinds?
Carolyn, I don't think the burden should be on my neighbor to do that. They like to keep their windows open. They want to do that. They do it all the time. They're still doing it today.
Well, then they can have people look inside their house. That's just the way it works.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if it's from 6 inches or 3 feet.
If
you had a peeping Tom at your house.
Well, here's the deal. How do people outside of an HOA deal with if somebody wants to stand on the sidewalk and look inside their house?
Well, for most HOAs, you tend to own the land by your windows, and you can say you're trespassing. Get off my land.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to represent my neighbor who was very frustrated. I was frustrated. It took a while to get this sorted out. It stopped. And just to be clear, it was not a peeping Tom incident, which involves someone who's looking in for pleasurable means. It was someone who I'll just stop there.
Okay.
Their motives were
purely creepy.
I won't even say that, just inexplicable.
Okay. So
just curious.
You can always close your window, your drapes. I don't know if we're going to get a rule against this. It goes back to is Jake going to enforce something?
Well,
and is that loitering?
I'm just asking, is there some other rule that can deal with things like that?
Okay.
I don't know, maybe the lawyer here could help us find a rule that might help with that specific
In my
situation.
situation where I couldn't prove criminal activity, but if this
Sure.
happened week after week after week after week, am I just gonna have to live with it?
Or,
And they're
or maybe
standing
you
there-
go talk to them and tell them, hey, why are you staring at in my window? Would you like to come over inside my house and meet with me?
But,
I mean,
yeah.
we don't have to have a rule for every single thing. And Jake, we cannot pay Jake to send out all these violations for all these little things because our camp fees
Right.
are going to go up. He already, has to have an assistant. And so maybe these rules that we're talking about making, maybe the HAC needs to be the ones that send out the letter, and we put money in our budget for our stamps. If we want to have these rules, then, maybe we're the ones that need to be signing the notice of violation.
I'd
don't-
rather not.
Yeah.
Which goes back to my initial comment of anything that we're not willing to enforce, we shouldn't write.
Exactly.
I don't think we should, as an HAC, enforce anything. We don't have.
Anything we're not asking Jake to enforce, we shouldn't put on there.
Well, we're back to self-enforcement though. Jake cannot enforce many of our rules. This is.
So
And we're getting off track a little bit
can
here.
I,
So-
what I'm trying to do is get some word that I can use to describe what you're describing, and I can't come up with a word.
Yeah, and so if there's no replacement for it, so be it. And as these situations occur, and my neighbors call, because I get a lot of complaints about things, I'll just say, can't help you.
Yeah, I think that we had a comment earlier. It's, the rule is please don't be a creepy asshole. And, and then we can just always keep referencing that. Sorry, you're being a creepy asshole. We're gonna cite you.
I don't know what the words are. And, keep in mind that
Better
we've got
definition.
1,100 people in this
Okay.
community.
What's up?
So this is one of the alternative definitions of common area up on the screen. It's the better definition than the one I read.
But where's this from? This is a different area, a different section?
Windows are still not in there.
Right.
Sure.
No, but you see in this area, it says outside the boundaries of the sublease parcels. And when you look at the boundaries of the sublease parcel, that window is inside what somebody
Yeah, I agree.
owns.
Yeah, it's inside their border.
It's
Okay.
inside
All
their
right,
portion.
I've made my point.
Yep.
Okay,
If we can't do anything, take it out and we'll just see what happens.
We'll
okay.
just get the lynch mob together and we'll take care of the creepy
Okay.
assholes.
I
Okay.
attended some HOA sessions.
So,
Okay.
so the next area is an objection to a new rule. Oh, and by the by, there's an objection to the common area rule that says, and it's not a big one, but I think maybe it's an easy one for us. We tell people in the old rules, we tell people to not put things in full trash cans. And several people responded that that was just a really insulting rule,
Mhm.
that we don't have the common sense not to overfill a full trash can in the community. And I was going to recommend that we delete that one also,
Sure.
Yeah.
because it's just foolish.
Yeah.
Everybody agree to that?
Let me add in something that may or may not replace that. At one point in time, and the committee didn't include it, Kennedy Wilson had made a comment about adding a rule that we're not supposed to use their dumpsters.
Mhm.
So they asked if that could be added. I don't believe it was from one. So I don't know if we want to deal with that now, but you can parking lot that if you
Okay,
need to.
I'm confused. I thought these rules also applied to the apartment dwellers as far as the common
no,
areas go.
they are governed by their leases, not by these rules.
Oh, so we have to follow the rules, but they have their own sets of rules, but then they make the rules for the amenities for us.
Something like that. But
Yep.
that
Hey,
gets
Tom,
back-
wasn't that part of what you were starting to do when you first started this project, was to look at what our rules were and compare them to Kennedy Wilson's? I've kind of read that a couple of times. You've mentioned it tonight. So you were
Yeah.
looking for the disparity. So this is kind of speaking to that point.
Yeah, and the assumption is that when Kennedy Wilson was asked for comments about things we have, that they will be aligning, ensuring that their rules align with ours, and some do not, and I can't even begin to talk about what those might be or are. But to the extent we submit rules, it's critical Kennedy Wilson sign on board and change their lease agreement.
Wow, so if they don't have the same rules, then and we see someone playing with a ball or riding a bike on a sidewalk, and we don't know if that kid lives at an apartment or a townhome, then what's the whole purpose of the rules? I thought we were going to have one set of rules. And if we don't, then why does Kennedy Wilson even get to have any input if they're for us? It just seems wrong. If their people aren't going to have to follow the rules, then they don't get to decide what our rules are. There's something real wrong with what I just heard.
Totally agree. And that's why, as we work through this, it has to be clear that our rules have to be put into the Kennedy Wilson lease agreement rules.
Or the compromise rules have to be put into both documents.
Otherwise, you correctly pointed out, it makes enforcement even harder.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it's not fair. And that's where it all started with the pools. There were differences in understanding of what you can do at the pool between apartment tenants and single-family townhome.
Mhm.
Well, then I would like to see a copy of the apartment rules.
Okay,
I think that would be good for everyone.
yeah, yeah, okay.
They're contained in their lease. I think we could ask for a current lease document. They do.
It's helpful to look and see what they currently have. But I think we should make our own rules and hope they follow them. Hope they put, not hope, require that they put that.
Well, we can require no one. We can recommend that they be required.
We can ask the site authority.
We
to
can
ensure
recommend that they be
happens.
required.
So you know that Kennedy Wilson, if you look at their sublease, ground sublease, their lease agreements have to be approved by the site authority, which would include the rules. So
So if they change it, then the site authority should sign off on it.
yeah, and the site
Right.
authority, I presume, also then has the ability to tell Kennedy Wilson, change your rules.
Sure.
That's a presumption.
So what's
Yes.
next on our list?
So what's next on our list is an objection to the confusing nature of what I call the pots and arts rules. And here I'd like to this is something that's governable by the aesthetics overview rule that we have, overhead rule that we have. I'd like to just throw this entire rule out. Are you seeing a theme here? I would like to throw
Sure.
this entire rule out and replace it with us implementing. If somebody creates something that's totally ugly, that's the basis on which we deal with it.
Okay, the aesthetics, I buy that. However, there are some aspects of this that are safety
All
related.
right, I'm willing to hear that argument.
And I think we should keep some safety requirements in there, just in terms of what you can put on your sidewalk.
Right.
Minus obstruct the flow of someone walking. in and
Right,
out.
so
Among
our
others.
sidewalks are basically, most of them are basically 3 feet wide. If it's a sidewalk that is a throughfare, if it's not a sidewalk that comes just to your door, okay? That's a kind of a defined destination sidewalk, as opposed to a sidewalk that's following along a street and goes from one end of the street to the next, to the next, to the next. I think if you were going to draft a rule that you may not obstruct the flow of traffic, so to speak, on a sidewalk that's a throughfare sidewalk. I have to go find the right rules, because if the sidewalk, okay,
You mean
so the sidewalk in
A
front of
walkway
my,
goes from a sidewalk to your front door.
right, so I have a sidewalk that literally dead ends at my front door.
That's a walkway.
Okay, all right.
I guess I think I'm making that up,
Okay,
but I
well,
don't know.
that's, see, I can handle that being a walkway. So a sidewalk that goes dead ends at the front door, and we have a ton of sidewalks that dead end at front doors, especially in our townhome groupings.
Well, if you define it as something other than a sidewalk, then it's not a sidewalk that goes to your
Okay.
front door.
Okay, so it's a walkway.
To
All
your front
right,
door.
all
The
right.
sidewalks are the 3-foot sections that are a parallel to streets.
Okay, so we cannot obstruct sidewalks.
Mhm.
You might be able to put something on a walkway.
Sure.
Again, I'll argue safety first.
Right.
We should follow ADA requirements or some minimum access requirement, even to walkways that go to your front door.
So,
I disagree with that.
what
I
we're
do
talking about,
I disagree with ADA requirements going to my front door. That's not
right,
going
but-
to my
but
front
what-
door.
Let her finish because it's really hard on Zoom. So
And what can be, we were looking at the common area rule. No one can put pots or any art or anything in the common area because that is a safety issue. It also impacts the landscapers. And if we just say you don't put anything in the common areas, which has always been the rule, then I don't understand the issue. That's
yeah,
my comment.
Well, I'll argue again. I gave ADA guidelines as the
well, one
guidelines.
of, I
So I
think
would-
when I got on the HAC, one of the issues was that the definition of common area at that point, as we just saw, was everything outside of your actual house. And, you know, and so I think that we were going down a path of must be clearance all the way to the front door, because Jake was defining that all the way to your front door was common area, and that we could define that space. And, you know, underneath, it's because there was, when we purchased, it was, hey, if it's underneath this archway, it's kind of yours, and outside that archway is not yours, right? Like,
Right.
and then all of a sudden there was a shift in, well, actually, it's common area all the way up to your front door, and we're going to
We have-
enforce that. And so we had to
we
kind of
have
pull back on
we
that.
have overstayed our time by 15 minutes.
I didn't know we had a 7:30 deadline.
We do, are we good to keep going?
But the common area, it goes to the wall on the single family homes. The outside of the wall is the common area and the inside of the wall
Depends on
is
what
our
side of your-
private area.
of your home.
Yeah,
We'll
and
talk.
I think I might be just thinking about, since I live in a townhome, you know, that issue there. But I do think that maybe depending on where the orientation of a house, there could be some that have a door on the side. But we're talking about pots in the common area, or we're talking about stuff in the common area on sidewalks.
Well, I'm talking right now, I think there should be a minimum clearance requirement for any pots placed anywhere on a sidewalk, whether it goes to your front door, goes on the
Okay.
street.
So-
There are.
I don't think so.
So.
Tom, you
well,
can't
I do-
decide what I
do
have at
think
my
there's a
front door.
safety concern.
Yeah,
I do
You're
think
concerned about
there's a
orders in
safety
the front
concern.
door?
So, no, the safety concern is we need fire department access to buildings. And so we do have a fire department access interest in the community at large, because if there's a fire, we need fire people to be able to get inside that house as quickly as they can.
So you can't block the entrance to
So
your
you
front
can't,
door.
right, you couldn't put a gate up and lock it and not let people through.
We have
Yeah,
allowed.
well,
people
we
to put
cer-
gates.
Yeah, that's probably not a good example.
I certainly could lock the gate if I wanted to, because that's my private property and that's between, you know, the fire department can access my house however they want, and any house in this neighborhood. There's no way that anyone, given the layout of this neighborhood, that they could block fire department access. The walls are only 2 feet tall. You know, the fire department can get over there. You
Super.
cannot regulate
So-
my private property.
Okay, let's-
So can I get you to give me some words and
Well,
can we
let
buy
me do
into
this.
my-
Let me research whether the fire department or any other external regulations mandate minimum clearance to front doorways. And we'll see what we got.
Okay,
And if the fire department requires some kind of code issue, I have no clue what it might look like or sound like. But if there's something there,
I mean, there's public access for public buildings.
okay,
So it has to be, you have to find something that says private
I'll
residence,
research it.
and we're not talking construction code, like,
I understand.
okay,
I'll research it and see what's there. But if there is some kind of code by the fire department,
let's discuss it
okay,
if you find it.
okay.
super. That leaves us with the new rule needed in this section, which is we didn't put a rule in about dogs on leashes or dog waste.
That dog leashing is in the ground sublease, but it's not in the rules addendum. It's in a very
Right.
odd place, but it does say dog. There's a whole set of stuff about dogs.
Right, and it does say they have to always be on a leash.
And so it can't be mean and aggressive and stuff like that.
But if our theory is that we're trying to have a one-stop shop for people
Yeah.
to go and find
Okay.
behavioral requirements, it seems to me that there needs to be a dog leash rule and a please clean up after your dog rule. And you said at one point, go look at the signs. You sent me a picture and yeah, I can write something from the signs.
Why
So
don't we
that-
just mirror what's already in the ground sublease? That's just so that there's no contradictory.
Well, there's nothing in the ground sublease that speaks to poop. It
Right,
speaks to leashing.
Yeah, leashing.
right. So we'll pick up the words in the ground sublease on leashing and we will use the current signs in the neighborhood. to
We would
get the
appreciate,
poop.
we would appreciate if everybody has common courtesy and picks up poop after their dogs.
Not appreciate, you must.
Or what?
Fines. If you're caught,
You're,
which isn't easy,
sure.
if you're caught, there is a fine. You're cited and you're fined.
Who has to catch you?
Whoever does.
Somebody with a camera.
I caught Tom not picking up after his
Yeah,
dog.
If you can provide evidence, it's hard to enforce, as we pointed out earlier.
They
But we
do
can't
have,
say it's
some HOAs have DNA where every dog has to register. If you want to go down that road, you can.
Yeah,
Now, I don't see it happening,
nope.
not in this community.
So that concludes section 1, the common area that I hoped us to talk
So
about
did we agree
tonight.
on a dog poop
Yep.
addition? Okay. Thanks to Carolyn for pointing that out several weeks ago. because
Well, Carolyn and a
the
couple
rules
of
committee
other,
should have caught that. Did not.
Carolyn and a couple of other people caught it, and yes, it was a.
What about the car maintenance? That had 4 comments and we skipped over that.
It's actually in 2 places.
Uh-huh.
And so if you go down to the bottom of my spreadsheet and you get to the parking and display of parking permits, there's a whole bunch of that stuff right there.
So we'll kind of
And
address
we
it
have,
down
and we
there.
have, in that whole section, we have 25 comments.
Sure.
And I basically have a recommendation. A good deal of these things are actually vehicular law and environmental regulations. And I'd actually like to kick this up to the site authority and say, we need a legal ruling about what this section
Oh, that'll-
needs to look like.
That'll never happen. But what about a better conversation there with the police about, what they're gonna actually ticket cars for Because there's a lot of those, I think, are
Well,
governed
so,
by,
so we have two groups. We have parking and traffic. And they're a for-profit organization interested in ticketing anybody they get down here to find. And
the parking enforcement, is that run by the university and the university gets the money?
It is a, yes.
Yeah.
And it is a department underneath the chief of police, but it's its own department.
Okay.
So what are we saying?
So what I'm suggesting that it is now 5 minutes of 8. And we are at a breaking point.
Okay, did we
What I-
resolve this issue? That's what I'm asking.
Parking?
Whatever this whole traffic.
I think it's in a different
Work-
section,
working
so.
on your-
It's,
So we're not gonna go any further.
that's what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting. that
Question,
we-
if we're getting close to closing this up, the conversations we were having for the first 30 minutes in terms of, the communications and the surveys and whatnot, what were our action items on that, or were those things still open?
No, I believe we came to a consensus on that, and therefore I would like to figure out, and it's an entire learning curve for me, figure out how we're going to implement a survey that basically asks the overhead question. Do you care a whit about this process and want to be involved, or would you like to just be left in peace?
Yeah, step one.
Step one is
Ask
that
the yes or no
that
question.
ask the yes or no question. And we'll get that response, and then we'll direct our follow-on communications to the subset that says they want to be involved.
Okay, did we
But-
put a
but I don't-
timeline on that?
Now, if you think we can get by with doing that.
Well, so we can definitely get a Google survey out, we can massage it to make sure that it catches as many people as possible, but I'm concerned really about the question about whether or not the first big yes or no, get on the list, the communications list or not kind of situation should, I really don't like printing things and postage and all that stuff. I just, maybe it's just my generation. But I did see a number of comments about, mail communication and sending things. Should the first one, we put a little postcard, yellow postcard for
Oh,
something.
yes, I paid for the last yellow postcard personally. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your donation. I'm wondering if anybody left here has input on that. I know there's a lot on the chat, so let's see who's left.
9.
We still have 9. We only lost 1. We lost iPhone. Okay. Yes, Simon. Oh yeah. You gave us, yes, your input. Yes, that was definitely put stuff in the mail. Is everything else in the chat? We'll just read it basically.
I have a question. The first question, as Sandy is posing it, like, do you care about all this stuff or not? Is I think that is going to cause people to say, oh, I really don't care. But if you say, hey,
Carolyn, I was
let me
kidding.
finish my statement.
I was
Sandy.
kidding though.
Well, I can't tell when you're kidding, but I think we do need to inform people what kind of rules we're talking about changing, about the balls, about the kids on the sidewalk, because there's a lot of busy mothers and fathers and grandparents who don't understand that you're going to change the rules about where their children can play or how loud they can be, or that you're trying to make a rule that it can't be louder than a bird chirping after 10 o'clock here. These things are the people, if you just say, oh, we're just changing the rules, and people don't really understand what you're changing or how that might impact them, then
Sure.
they're not going to respond. We have to tell them
Sure.
what we're planning on doing.
This is catch-22. Because then we're gonna have to basically work through all the rules.
Well, no, because the idea is to still ask if people would like to further be involved. So the idea, because we're talking about trying to get more community input. And the reason why on the what movie do you want to see on Halloween night got 150 responses in 2 hours was because it was a really simple checkbox. You know, this is what I want, and submit it.
Right.
And so I agree with Carolyn. We have to fully convey the question well. It doesn't mean though that in the end, it still shouldn't be a quick, I do want to be involved or I don't want to be involved.
So,
Right. And then maybe hopefully give us a good give us your email address where you'd like these communications to go so that you can be properly involved. You know, and setting up some standards as well normally helps so that the communication has certain things in the title so people always know. It starts with, you know, here's your rules committee information for this week or this quarter or this every 2 weeks, so that people can filter out the general UGCAM blasts and this one that they've asked to be involved in. So yeah, Carolyn, we just need to find that right point between conveying enough information, but still getting a yes or no kind of response.
So let me just express a part of the concern that I have about what you just said. Right now, all of the staff work that is being done for the HAC is being done by me.
Sure.
I am currently putting in, on average, something in the range of 150 hours a week, keeping this organization afloat. If you average the big bulk of time that I put in 24/7 kind of in August against where we are. So this has to be something that's personally manageable, or someone else has to step up to help. And I think that's, you know, when I had to take myself offline this week because we had a family, you know, crisis,
okay.
you know, that's what happened. So people have to step up to do pieces of this in order to make it happen.
Guys, this is simple. Carolyn, do you want me, I'm sorry, Sandy, do you want somebody to draft this thing? I'll give you 3 drafts. Give us a way to circulate it with this group and we'll get an answer, a consensus like in a week and a half. But we have things that are going on too long.
Super.
I personally understand you are in a tough place because you're doing it all. Fine, I'll draft something. Just how do we get an approval before the next meeting?
So we are scheduled to meet again on this subject on the 11th of November.
That's too long for me. How do we get something in the next week?
I would agree that is too long. We have an HAC meeting next week. That meeting has basically been taken over by the site authority to announce the 32-acre development.
I don't need to do this in a HAC meeting. We have a group of people around here right now that in 4 days,
so if
we
you
can
would
get
like,
a draft
if
circulated.
you would like a working group, we can pull a Zoom working group together at the point you tell me you're ready, and I'll ask.
Why don't we just
ask who joins.
Wendell, I can work with you. I can work with
him-
you on Wednesday. of next week.
Yeah, let's let
I
them
am
draft
going out
all
of
something.
town,
They want to
though.
work together. That's fine. We'll review it, email it out.
Okay.
We can
The
get it.
the only thing that I would like is, because I want to make sure that the right people see it. And right now, the people that are involved in this call and sitting in this room would be the people I would try to circulate it to. So if I have an email
Sounds good.
address or something or
Sounds
whatever, but the point is, you know, we've got to move something. We can't wait from meeting to meeting to meeting. There's
So
some things we might be
Wendell,
able to.
I will send you the HAC mailing list so that you've got all of our emails, if you don't already. And I think we're basically the group that needs to look at what you're about to draft for us. And I would be most grateful if you would, thank you for offering. I'm most grateful.
Okay, let's draft the communication first. There's still the concept of, well, do we mail the survey or do we do the Google Docs? That's something we can deal with next. But let's start working on the communication first and see what we get a consensus on.
Super, thank you.
Okay, what's happening is, and all of us are doing is, we don't do this in our regular work life, so why are we doing it now? Some of us are stepping up. Let's, at the end of a meeting, say, let's do something. So that's a minor thing to do, but let's start with that.
So Wendell, I'm not stating what I'm going to do next, but we have done one section. My take home from this meeting is I will write the redraft of that section, and I'd love to be able to share it with someone who does English better than I do,
Okay.
I tend to be a very practical writer, and that means I take shortcuts when I shouldn't at times. So I'd love if I can share that with you for editorial comment. I'd be grateful for that also.
Okay, what I'm also seeing after working with this organization, and it's really sad, and it's sad that it's only the same 8 or 9 people. And the same 8 or 9 people have been doing this for 3 or 4 years. So by the way, thank you guys for what you've been doing. So I hope I don't sound too aggressive, but because I really appreciate it.
No.
Okay,
No,
so really,
no.
okay, but it's time to get some new stuff going. I'll help you any way I can.
Thank you so much.
Sounds good. So we have our first action item resolved.
And my action item is we've done one section. The decisions we made tonight, I will draft language around that. And I guess circulate it because we could move faster if we can do it offline from the
Okay.
meeting.
Other actions, Carolyn, you're still on board for creating a red line document at some point?
I am on board, and
Okay.
I like the idea of the survey, but I think we divide it up by interest, like kids, RVs. There's people that are really upset about RV rules, and we can divide it like that, Wendell. I think that's a good idea. How it can
Okay.
affect them.
Yeah, okay, well, however we do that.
And
I have an action item to.
What about Dusty Russell? Dusty, you want to help?
I didn't know if I was allowed to speak or anything, so I've just been hanging.
Dude, everybody else is talking, of course, please. We're sick of listening to
No,
ourselves.
I didn't know. I've submitted comments on a couple rounds, one back in June, and then I submitted one this afternoon around 2:40, so that's probably why it hasn't been considered.
So your 240 will get added to the spreadsheet when I get it in email tonight.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah,
Okay.
we put a lot of thought into this. Again, I mean, we're on the
Well-
same page. We appreciate all the volunteering that you guys are doing. Even though I have a lot of issues with the rules and stuff as they're being proposed. So I try to stay engaged when I can, but just like everyone else, there's other things that take priority.
Well, do you have anything you want to add to this conversation for now, Dusty, that your feelings after being at this meeting for 2 hours?
I mean, I've sent everything in writing, so I think that's helpful. I even posted it on the Glen happenings, which I never post to, but just to kind of like encourage other people to weigh in. I don't care if people
I've
hate
seen
on my
it, I just
comments or
didn't have
what.
time to summarize it.
But yeah, no, I mean, this is a helpful conversation. I'm glad I tuned in, and again, I appreciate that you guys are volunteering your time for this. Ultimately, I think everybody wants to preserve quality of life here, and that's good. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, we got to keep these rules and regulations focused on safety. They tend to creep into some other areas that are just silly. So again, all my stuff is in writing. Kevin knows how to get a hold of me. I'm not too hard to find. If I can be engaged, I'm happy to be engaged.
Thanks for coming out.
Good to
We
hear from you,
appreciate
Dusty.
you joining us.
Sure.
Does anybody else want to say anything?
I think people can people just unmute?
Yeah,
Ivy?
Miriam, you're there. I don't know who Peak Marketing is. We got Getty Resources. I don't know who that is.
That's me twice. I've got 2 screens up.
Oh, got it. Okay. Miriam, you want to say anything?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I think that I think I would ditto what Dusty said as far as I'm more about safety and being cautious about not trying to overregulate. And I think that we also don't want to have, if we have expectations that Jake is going to have to then ticket people or fine people, our CAM fees are going to go up. So I caution against that too. And I think we have to go back to when we had the days of Ventura, the other management group. I can't think of their name. Ventura
Investment.
Yeah. Before, when we had them, we had that big fiasco about everyone getting fines for, a little pot or I had a little decorative cat that was not in the planting area. They just, everybody was getting these fines. And I think it kind of did bring attention to that. Maybe we do need to, keep things kind of tidy so the community is kind of clean, but keeping in mind that people have, they're individuals and they have their own, I just kind of, Tom was talking about calling the fire, to check with the fire department and seeing what the code was about, gaining entry into your home and, inch wise and all that. And I think that we can kind of look at it a little bit objectively and see, is there a house where it looks like there might be a hoarding issue or an access issue? And then we can deal with it one-on-one rather than trying to overregulate everything. Not to take away from, I think it is good. And I am very much supportive of having Kennedy Wilson's rules be in line with our rules. So that is important, but I think we have to kind of just not get too carried away with the rules. I do like the idea of breaking them down by people's interest. However, we still want to be mindful that if we are reaching out to people, and mostly people are responding that have children, we want to make sure that they aren't making rules for the whole community based on the fact that they have children. Same thing for people if they don't have children or if they have RVs. We have to kind of keep the whole community, in mind when we are adjusting rules. But I think it is a good way to get more people engaged on a level that is something a little bit more of interest to them. So, I think this has kind of been a good discussion, a little bit better than, I think, a little less confrontational than earlier conversation. So I am appreciative of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak before we adjourn?
I don't see anyone. No one's saying they want to talk on the comments, so.
We have over 100 comments, looks like. So I think everybody definitely chimed in there. So we'll have to read through those and make sure we get that. And we're hearing again. So
Okay.
So I have one last question. Do you want to reconvene sooner in order to keep making progress on this? We're currently scheduled to reconvene on this topic on the 11th of November.
Normally, I think in order to have momentum, depending on the size of the work, I struggle. Is it monthly, or is it every other week, every 3 weeks? I don't have a lot of, this is the third night in a row where I have not been home with my kids, and it's hard to keep coming to these. So if they were every other week, I would probably struggle to make all of them myself.
This is 1 month. You're talking 1 month, Sandy, but we have to give the community more than 3 days notice. You can't send it out on Friday afternoon. You need to send it right now, tomorrow, saying we're having a meeting in a month. So people can schedule it and then send it in another week, a meeting in 3 weeks, and then another, we have to give people more notice. I schedule my life out weeks in advance.
Okay, I'll do that. See what happens.
So the next one then is the 11th.
The next meeting exclusively devoted to rules is November 11th.
That's in 4 weeks. That gives enough time.
Yeah, if we
However,
give them notice.
So what do we do with Wendell's work?
We're gonna get that done. Today's
Well, now that
Thursday.
I've opened my big mouth, so what, probably by Sunday or Monday or something, no later than Monday morning, I'll figure out some way to get some type of draft of 3 messages that we can send out. We start the conversation on that, and I'll send it to the HAC and to to that HAC input in addition to anybody that's on this particular call. And it's because you're part of the group as well. If you're here, you know, we can all kind of look at it together.
Let's-
And we'll just kind of, we'll work it out and try to maybe have something done by, I don't know, Wednesday.
So,
I'm thinking
No, I
in my
think-
work time, but maybe things move a little differently because we have so many different inputs here. So-
Wendell, when you ship it out, I'll read through it. Maybe you and I can kind of come to an initial agreement about what we both see, if we bring different perspectives, and then we can send that draft out to everybody.
I prefer to send that draft out to 3 or 4 people at the same time.
All right, so.
And I don't know how to
however
do
you
that,
would
but
like.
we'll
My
figure that out.
difficulty is getting the process to get agreement, because that requires us to have a place and time to communicate. Next week, I know that we already have 2 meetings scheduled next week that are HAC related. Potentially, we could take a few minutes at the end of the HAC meeting next Thursday night. Would people agree to spend 5 or 10 minutes at the end of that to come to a consensus about what Wendell's done?
I
Yeah,
sent Wendell all the email addresses of everyone on the HAC. He can just email us and we can respond. That's how we get agreement when we're not in a meeting. Why can't we
Yeah.
do that now?
Yeah, I think we should just work via email. And I think if we could get it out by Wednesday, because then at the Thursday meeting, we can let everybody know to check their email for that title, you know, so the HAC meeting on Thursday might be well attended.
I assume so.
And so we might be able to jump in before the site authority kind of takes over and let them know about this process, and that we sent an email yesterday with this title. So it might be a little bit another good time to mention it. And that normally works better, because I know for me, if somebody tells me there was an email yesterday that was important and I hear and I think about it, I pull up my email right then and I find it. And if people are on Zoom, they're on their computer, so they do that. If you tell them, we're going to send you an email tomorrow, it's not always as effective. So
a 2-minute announcement sounds fine.
yeah.
Okay.
So we'll set a goal of sending it out on Wednesday then.
Perfect.
Okay, well, I better get to work. So there you have it.
All right.
Bye. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Thanks,
Everybody have a good
everybody.
night.
Thank you.
Night.